Imagine stepping into an American kitchen in 1933. There is no microwave, no refrigerator humming in the corner, and certainly no grocery delivery arriving at the front door. The country is in the middle of the Great Depression. Jobs are scarce, money is tight, and families are forced to make every ingredient count. Yet somehow, millions of households still manage to put meals on the table every single day. They did it with knowledge, patience, and a refusal to waste anything that still had value. Many of the habits that helped families survive those difficult years have almost disappeared. Some were replaced by convenience. Others were forgotten as new products filled store shelves. But for earlier generations, these weren't clever tricks. They were ordinary parts of daily life. And the first one could be found in almost every kitchen in America. 1. The jar beside the stove. Walk into a farmhouse kitchen during the 1930s, and you would often find a small jar sitting near the stove. To modernize, it might look like leftover grease waiting to be thrown away. To your grandmother, it was one of the most useful ingredients in the house. After cooking bacon, the fat was carefully strained and saved rather than discarded. A spoonful could flavor vegetables, improve cornbread, fry potatoes, or add richness to simple meals. When money was scarce, wasting something useful simply wasn't an option. Families understood that every ingredient had value beyond its first use. That habit of finding multiple uses for one simple item did not stop in the kitchen. It extended throughout the entire house, including the way families kept things clean. 2. The 10-cent cleaner. Long before cabinets were filled with specialized cleaning products, one inexpensive bottle often handled nearly every cleaning task in the home. That bottle was white vinegar. Families used it to clean windows, wipe counters, remove odors, soften laundry, and even help clear greasy buildup. It was affordable, easy to find, and remarkably versatile. Instead of buying several different products, many households relied on a single solution that could serve multiple purposes. The idea was simple. If one product could do the work of 5, there was no reason to spend money on the other 4. Resourcefulness often mattered more than brand names. And nowhere was that resourcefulness more visible than in the foods families gathered for free. 3. When weeds became dinner today, many homeowners spend time and money trying to remove dandelions from their lawns. During the Great Depression, many families saw those same plants very differently. Young dandelion greens were collected and brought into the kitchen as a source of fresh food. They could be added to salads, cooked alongside other vegetables, or combined with simple ingredients already available at home. What many people now consider a weed was once viewed as something useful growing right outside the door. Families learned to recognize opportunity where others saw inconvenience. When every dollar mattered, free food was difficult to ignore. The ability to make use of what nature provided helped stretch household budgets much further than most people realize today. And even after supper was finished, another valuable ingredient remained, sitting in the cooking pot. 4. The water most people poured away. After potatoes finished boiling, most people today would simply pour the cloudy water down the drain without a second thought. During the Great Depression, many families saw that water differently. The starchy liquid left behind from cooking potatoes often found its way into bread dough, helping create softer loaves with a better texture. Some cooks added it to gravies and soups, making meals a little heartier without spending an extra penny. It was a small habit, but Depression-era kitchens were built on dozens of small habits like this. Nothing was wasted if it still had value. Every ingredient was expected to do as much work as possible before it left the kitchen. That same thinking shaped the way families stored food for the months ahead. 5. The room beneath the house. Long before refrigerators became common in American homes, many families depended on a space hidden beneath the ground. Known as the root cellar, it remained cool throughout the year and provided a safe place to store potatoes, apples, carrots, onions, and preserved foods. For many households, the root cellar represented security. A successful harvest could be stored for months, helping families survive winter without constant trips to town. Even during power outages or severe storms, the cellar continued doing its job without electricity or modern technology. Generations of Americans trusted these underground storage rooms because they worked. And while the cellar protected food, families also discovered ways to create useful household products from materials that would otherwise be discarded. 6. turning scraps into soap. In Depression-era America, leftover grease rarely went to waste. After enough cooking fat had been collected, families could transform it into homemade soap using techniques passed down through generations. Making soap required time and effort, but it allowed households to create something essential without spending scarce money at the store. The finished bars were used for washing clothes, cleaning hands, and handling countless daily chores around the home. The process reflected a larger lesson that many families understood well. What looked like waste often contained hidden value. With enough knowledge and patience, ordinary scraps could become something useful once again. That same resourcefulness appeared in another forgotten practice that helped families preserve one of the most valuable foods on the farm: 7 keeping spring eggs for winter. Before reliable refrigeration became common, families faced a simple problem. Chickens produced plenty of eggs during certain seasons, but far fewer during others. Instead of letting the surplus go to waste, many households preserved eggs so they could be used months later. Fresh eggs collected during productive months were carefully stored using methods that protected them from spoilage. By the time winter arrived, families still had access to an important source of food that otherwise might have disappeared from the table. The practice required planning ahead, something Depression-era families did exceptionally well. They understood that preparing today often prevented problems tomorrow, and few foods demonstrated that lesson better than the next item on our list. 8. The soup that fed everyone. During difficult economic times, few meals stretched a budget further than a simple pot of bean soup. Dried beans were affordable, easy to store, and capable of feeding a large family with very little cost. A soup pot simmering on the stove often contained whatever ingredients were available. Beans, onions, leftover vegetables, and sometimes a ham bone could be transformed into a filling meal that lasted for days. Families understood that good cooking was not about expensive ingredients. It was about making the most of what you already had. The result was a meal that provided comfort, nutrition, and value all at the same time. And while bean soup helped families through hard times, some of the next Depression-era habits may be even more surprising because modern research has actually confirmed, many of them 9, the sweet remedy. For generations, raw honey occupied a special place in many American homes. Long before pharmacy aisles offered dozens of products for every minor problem, families often turned to simple remedies they already trusted. When children developed sore throats or family members suffered small cuts and scrapes, honey was frequently one of the first things people reached for. Its natural properties made it a popular household staple, and many families believed it belonged in both the kitchen and the medicine cabinet. What makes this story especially interesting is that modern research has renewed interest in some of the same qualities people appreciated decades ago. While earlier generations may not have understood the science behind it, they knew from experience that certain traditional remedies seemed to work. And honey was only one example of a much larger philosophy that guided Depression-era life. 10. Nothing was thrown away. In many households, throwing something away was considered the last option, not the first. Shirts were patched, socks were repaired, buttons were saved, and worn clothing often found a second life before finally being discarded. Children grew up watching parents repair what broke instead of replacing it. A small sewing kit could extend the life of clothing for years, helping families save money during difficult times. Even fabric that could no longer be worn might become cleaning rags, quilt pieces, or material for future repairs. This habit was about more than saving money. It reflected a mindset that valued usefulness over convenience. Earlier generations looked at an object and asked how much life remained in it, rather than how quickly it could be replaced. That same mindset appeared in the way families handled food from the garden. 11. Putting summer on the shelf. Every summer brought an abundance of fresh vegetables and fruit. The challenge was making sure that abundance lasted through winter. Long before frozen food aisles became common, families relied on home canning to preserve what they grew. Kitchen tables filled with jars of tomatoes, green beans, peaches, jams, and pickles. Shelves slowly transformed into a food reserve that could support the household for months after the growing season ended. Each jar represented preparation, patience, and a little insurance against uncertain times. For many families, canning was not a hobby. It was an important part of feeding the household throughout the year. The The work completed during summer often determined how comfortable winter would be. By now, it's easy to see a pattern. Earlier generations rarely wasted food, clothing, or household resources. But the next traditions may be even more surprising because they transformed some of the simplest ingredients into meals that families still remember today. The Great Depression forced Americans to become creative in ways that seem almost unbelievable today. Yet, many of the foods and habits that emerged from those difficult years are still remembered because they worked. The next few examples show how ordinary ingredients could be transformed into meals that kept families fed when money was scarce and options were limited. 12 biscuits during hard times. A warm pan of biscuits could turn a few inexpensive ingredients into a meal that felt far more substantial than its cost suggested. Flour, fat, and a little liquid were often all that was needed. These biscuits appeared at breakfast tables, supper tables, and everything in between. They could be eaten with gravy, preserves, vegetables, or simply on their own. Their popularity came from their simplicity and affordability. For families living through hard times, recipes like this provided more than food. They provided consistency. Even when circumstances were difficult, familiar meals helped to create a sense of comfort and normalcy. And when even bread began to grow stale, resourceful cooks still found ways to make it useful. 13 yesterday's bread became tomorrow's dessert. Stale bread was never automatically considered waste. Instead, it often became the starting point for an entirely new dish. Bread pudding transformed leftover bread into a warm dessert that families could enjoy without spending extra money. Milk, eggs, sugar, spices, and old bread came together to create something far more appealing than its humble ingredients might suggest. The dish appeared in homes, church gatherings, and community events across the country. More importantly, bread pudding represented a larger lesson. Resourceful cooks learned to see possibilities where others saw leftovers. The goal was not simply saving money, it was making sure good food never went to waste. That same philosophy extended beyond leftovers and into the garden itself. 14 growing food from leftovers. Many Depression-era families understood that some kitchen scraps still had value. Vegetable tops, roots, and cuttings could often be replanted or encouraged to grow again. Green onions, celery, lettuce, and potatoes were among the foods that families learned to regenerate rather than replace immediately. A single purchase could sometimes produce multiple harvests with a little patience and care. This approach reflected a deep understanding of self-sufficiency. Instead of constantly buying new supplies, people looked for ways to produce more from what they already had. Every small success reduced dependence on outside resources, and all of these habits eventually pointed toward one final place that may have mattered more than any other. 15. The garden that changed everything. If there was one tool that helped countless American families survive difficult times, it was the backyard garden. A productive garden provided vegetables, herbs, and fresh food throughout much of the year, while reducing the amount of money needed for groceries. Families planted whatever space they could find. Empty corners of the yard became growing areas. Fences supported climbing vegetables. Every available patch of soil was viewed as an opportunity. The garden represented far more than food production. It represented independence. It gave families a measure of control during uncertain times and helped them provide for themselves when money was limited. Looking back at these forgotten Depression-era kitchen habits reveals something remarkable. Earlier generations faced enormous challenges, yet they responded with creativity, patience, and resourcefulness. They learned how to preserve food, repair clothing, reuse materials, and make the most of every ingredient that entered the home. Many of these habits disappeared as modern life became more convenient. Yet their lessons remain surprisingly relevant. They remind us that sometimes the smartest solutions are not the newest ones. Sometimes they are the simple ideas that helped previous generations get through some of the hardest years in American history.